Welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we are talking about Josh Giddey and if he can become a first-time All-Star and what this would mean for the Chicago Bulls. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Monis Mazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. We're talking about Josh Giddey and all-star potential and what this would mean for the Chicago Bulls and their direction. And so got a chance to look at this article here. And so within this article, it's going to take you to a podcast that is on The Athletic. And the show is about first-time All-Stars. And so one of the hosts picked Josh Giddey. And so if you go into this article, you click the link, it'll take you directly to that portion of the show. And you can, hear about what was discussed and why he went ahead and picked Josh Giddey as a potential first-time All-Star here. And so that kind of made me thinking, if Josh Giddey were to become an All-Star, what does this mean for the bigger picture here for the Chicago Bulls? And so going back just to the topic here on the article, and so surprise All-Star in 2026 if the Bulls sign him or re-sign him. And so first and foremost, the Chicago Bulls, I think, are going to re-sign Josh Giddey. I think that it's going to be a foregone conclusion here. I think that there's two options. I think he either takes the qualifying offer and he's going to play the year on that, or they're going to come to some type of agreement. And I think that really what it comes down to here is that you just need to get to the sweet spot. And when you're talking about the sweet spot in a negotiation, it's something where you don't necessarily love it, but you don't necessarily dislike it. And so I think that the Bulls and Josh Giddey are probably going to come somewhere in the middle of this. And so, depending on what the reports, that you're reading and you believe here, whether his camp wants the 30 million, the Bulls are at 20 million, blah, whatever that is, I think that Josh Giddey and the Bulls are going to come to some type of agreement. So with that out of the way, now looking at the potential season for Josh Giddey, and could he become a first-time All-Star? Yes, I do believe that there is the potential that Josh Giddey could become a first-time All-Star. I mean, the potential is always out there, when you're coming into an NBA season. But, with Josh Giddey and the way that he finished the season, absolutely. I mean, I think that when you look at those numbers and keep in mind, the numbers that we're talking about here were just, out of the stratosphere, because 20.2 points, 9.3 assists, 10.7 rebounds. So nearly a triple double, but 45.7% from downtown, 50% from the field, had him at 82.1 from the free throw line. I mean, those numbers, that's just wild when you're talking about the percentages. And so do I think that Josh Giddey would shoot those type of percentages? Not necessarily sold on that, but I do believe that he could potentially really flirt with averaging a triple-double throughout the season, especially since the roster has changed over a bit. One of the things that you will often see about Josh Giddey and Coby White and just their play down the stretch was that they moved on from Zach LaVine. And I do think that, look, once they did move on from Zach LaVine, both players definitely went ahead and stepped up, into really a new role, so to speak, and they took off and they ran with it, and especially Josh Giddey. And I think that this is what Josh Giddey really signed up for when he decided that, hey, he didn't want to, stay and just be on the reserve role for the Thunder. He wanted to be the lead guard. So got a chance to be the lead guard. I think that he took off with that, as we just talked about those numbers. And that was, the post All-Star break numbers. But when you just look at the season that he had, I think that you can see a player that if he is more like he was in the second half of the season, which that's what Josh Giddey said when he was asking his presser at the end of the year, are you more of the first half or are you more of the second half player? And he said more of the second half player. And so if that is true, then Josh Giddey is certainly going to be trending towards being an all-star here, because you see that his points went up slightly here. So 14.6 points up from the 12.3. You also see that his steals went up. And so I think that his activity defensively got better. I think that that's something overall he's definitely going to have to work on. But still, I think that he got more engaged down the stretch. So 1.2 to the 0.7 with the steals. And then the rebounds went up. So 8.1 with his rebounds. You see that if you just look at his 3-point percentage, I know we were talking about the 45.7 down the stretch after the All-Star break, but still 37.8% up from 33.7. That's a huge difference here. And then 7.2 assists a game. That's a big difference. And so, look, I think that Josh Giddey is going to come in more confident this time around once they hopefully get the deal done. And it's something that, again, you don't necessarily love it, but you don't necessarily dislike it here. So he's happy enough. He's in a great space there, but I think he comes in knowing that, hey, he's got the keys to the car here. And so I think that he's going to take that role and really run with it. And so I think he gets better. But the question is, what does this mean for the Chicago Bulls? Because, look, we've had Zach LaVine, and Zach LaVine has been here. And look, he's been an all-star, but the team didn't necessarily get better. And so it's great if we have an all-star. It's great if we have all-stars. And so we'll talk about Coby White, here in a minute. But if Coby White and these guys become all-stars, what does this mean for the team? Does this mean that the team wins more? Does this mean that the team is also developing some of its younger talent? Because at the end of the day, awards are awards. And the bottom line is, man, we want to see this team win again. And so, with that, I think that it's great if you see Josh Giddey trend towards being an all-star or even a Coby White. But the biggest question is, how does that translate to wins? And so do we see a team that as they are getting these accolades, they're learning how to win basketball games? Because I think that that is super important. And I think that you often hear that debate that, there's a case for, as you're winning, you're also developing as well. And I do believe that, I think that there is some truth to that, because if you're winning, you're developing winning habits, and things like that, that just don't necessarily translate to just the stat sheet. And I do think that that's important, which is why I'm in the camp of that. When you add like a veteran or you add players that have done it at a high level, that does add something to your team. And so, with these guys being young, and, being a part of your core, I think that it would be huge if they can win along the way with getting these awards and things like that. And the second thing that I would have to, question here is that, does this translate into more development, right? So like with Billy Donovan, do you now decide that, hey, we're going to tap in a little bit more to our younger talent? Does this mean that, Noah Asingay gets his game? Because we know that he's definitely a developmental piece, but he is going to need a guard like Josh Giddey, especially when he's out in transition or if he's going backdoor for these lobs and things like that. We know Josh Giddey can find him. Heck, we know Coby White can find him. We know that Ayo can find him, things like that. So it's about elevating your young talent and developing these guys too. And so that's going to be super important. And the next thing too to think about with this is that with Josh Giddey getting better and becoming an all-star, and the potential too of a guy like Coby White rising to an all-star level, does this mean that the front office now is going to look at this build of the team differently? Like, are they going to be more willing to really, I think, tap in more so on this development? Are you more willing to go ahead and be more patient? Are you going to take the direction of you just want to go out here, rush, and try to get a veteran in here as quickly as possible, or veterans kind of doing the same thing that you did, when you first came in and you got DeMar DeRozan and all these guys and put them together? So that's the question too. Does the front office really get more of a direction if they see their younger players have some success? Because you have to factor in that, look, if Modest Buzelis does start to become a player that is trending towards being a franchise player, or Josh Giddey or Coby White, not to take anything away from any of these players, but if they do, what type of patience, what type of direction do we get here from the front office? And then, lastly here, when it comes down to it, it's just going to be all about I think just getting away from just the stagnation that we've seen with this team over the time. Like, I just think that even when you do see some success from one player or players, if they do become all-stars or whatever, you can't just sit there and go, okay, hey, we've made it. Like, I would hope that this team continues to be aggressive in the front office. You continue to look at ways in which you can get some more draft capital to go along with these players, because keep in mind, if Josh Giddey and like Coby White, these guys have big time years, I mean, if you lock up Josh Giddey, cool. But then if you don't trade Coby White and he has a big year, you got to think about how are you going to go ahead, make sure that you lock him up because there is no restricted free agency as far as going ahead and signing him. But then also, too, you got to think about, all right, how do you strategically plan to put pieces around these guys to where it doesn't, set the franchise back and it continues on that growth, because that's what you ultimately have to do. And so hopefully we see that. And so you guys let me know in the comments here. Do you feel like that Josh Giddey will be an all-star next season? And if he does become an all-star with the Chicago Bulls, does this mean that this is going to translate into more wins? Do we translate into more development? Is this something that translates to the front office? Do we see better moves with this front office? Are they playing more chess than checkers? And then lastly, as far as this thing just being stagnant and being a play-in team, is this a team that rises out of that? So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.